And everybody mute yourselves. We don't want to hear a bunch of stuff.
Put a link in the chat in case anybody.
Yep, there's another link. And panel, when you guys get back, you can just pop in and unmute yourself so I know that you're done listening. All right, ready?
Time to sit and think about myself, and there she was, like double cherry pie. There she was, like disco superfly. Surely it's a dream. Mama, it's a dream. Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much caffeine, too much caffeine, too much caffeine. Out there she in platform double sway. There she was, like disco lemonade. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? My mother surely is a dream. Mama is a dream. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? My mother surely is a dream. Mama is a dream.
All right, I guess Michael's done, even though he didn't unmute himself like we all agreed to.
Michael's not good at following instructions.
I was watching you dance. I was distracted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this was I like this. First of all, just like completely aside from this mix, the fact that there's like the breakdown is like at the beginning of the song, it's super interesting.
That's
and totally
a
different.
Weird choice. The first time I
Right.
heard that, I was like, that's
Is
weird.
this
It
the
just
end?
feels really weird. Yeah, that's an interesting choice for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't hate this mix at all. Let me get back up there. I did.
Thanks, Connor. That's cool. We shall
I-
remain friends.
If I walked into this, I wouldn't be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like, it's different than how I mixed it, but it wasn't like wrong or anything. I thought it sounded really good. I thought your vocals sat like perfectly on it, and you had a really good, like right before the breakdown, when it does like not quite a tom roll, but when it goes around the toms, it really came through. It just sounded really good, really nice. It was well balanced drum kit. Also, I noticed your perk was pretty deep in the mix.
Yeah, I didn't really, that was something that there was more noise in those tracks than I liked. And so you
Especially
kind
the
of,
tamale.
yeah, you start smearing things like, they add a little bit, but I'd rather have a really clean drum kit, and keep those transients clean. And that's something that if you have more than 15 minutes, I'd work on that. The other, some things that obviously I spent, when you watch the video, you'll see I spent a lot of that time trying to get the vocal to behave itself.
He was really dynamic. I also noted that in my video. It was like I have him like really good at one point, and then suddenly he would say something else, and I was like, "Where'd he go?" Like,
yeah. And if you watch the video of them doing the recording, he is a maniac. He's running around, he's jumping up and down. I mean, he's just not. It's like the mic technique is non-existent, and that's his prerogative as a performer. And I think there's some interesting lessons there about what do we do to deal with that. But I think that was one of the things that I made a conscious decision to like get that to sit, because I think if that is inconsistent, like the rest of the mix can be great, but it still is perceived as it really hurts the perception if your vocal's wild,
Mhm.
So that was a thing that I wanted to keep it dynamic, but still have it be reasonable sounding. And then trying to get you see again, the last 5 minutes of the video, like vocal horns. I'm just trying to, it's like landing the airplane, right? I'm just trying to like hone that in and get that to sit where I wanted it to sit.
I dug the effects on the horns. I thought it was great because like the reverb was bright, and I love a bright reverb, and it was very wide. And I felt like I was hearing the reverse returns, but I don't know whether I was correct on that.
It's
like,
so my horn it's funny because just on the podcast today, Dennis Culp, who's the trombone player from Five Iron Frenzy, the episode that came out, and I told him like when I mix horns, that band's horn sound is really what I reference a lot of that stuff off, because it's not this super bright Chicago sound where the horns are right here. It's like I wanted like a fatter, rounder thing, and those weren't super recorded that way. So I was doing a lot of control of the high mid to do that. But yeah, I like a more roomy kind of round horn sound. I don't like this razor blade horn sound as much. So that was something that I was working on.
I toured
really-
with. Sorry, I
I'm
was going to
sorry, go
say.
ahead.
Oh well, I was going to say I toured with Annibalus, and that was kind of the thing too. Very, very deptones, dark, like. But they were a horn section that only wanted to hear one monitor mix. They didn't believe in two. They were just like, we're just going to hear the mix. We want to hear
It's
mix
a
of each
blend,
other.
dude. It works. Yeah. I worked on a Take Six, the gospel a cappella group.
Yeah.
There's 6 of those guys on stage, and 4 of them have the same in-ears mix, and that's unbelievable.
That's great.
But and their front of house engineer said, like, he's like, no, I make them listen to them. They have to sing for the group. They can't sing for themselves, is what he said, and it works. So, yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of panning to kind of give the horns some section sound, but then it's really about this is a horn section, and so most of the horn work that I did is done on the subgroup. So it's a section. It's not 3 individual players.
I really loved the marriage that you had between the keys and the guitars. I thought they fit very nicely together, and with the guitars, because they had 2 different roles that I kind of struggled with figuring out where to place them, because one is sort of like a rhythmic, deeper, low register, chunky kind of deal, and then the other one's more of a lead noodly bit. And you got the noodly bit and the keys and the chunky all to kind of fit really well together.
Oh, thanks, Will. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I like listening to those guitars. Like, no one's on top there, but there's like a lot of nice little. It's very like Quincy Jones. Like if you listen to like the Thriller guitar stuff, it's down in the mix, but it's perfect, And if it were any lower, any higher, it wouldn't be as groovy. And so that's kind of where I was feeling that,
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Michael, but I know you texted over the preview video of you going through the mix. Were you intending for us? Are you cool with us to post that on
Oh,
the?
yeah. No, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, watch.
So I'll go ahead and get that.
For sure.
Awesome. So just for people on the listening in and in the chat there, so we definitely have the full video, even with some nice commentary in text over the top that Michael put in, kind of what he was up to and how he went through that mix. So we'll get that on the main QuickMix landing page.
Yeah, I basically just put it's again the Rhino John Day calendar here strikes again. Ryan has a great video where he shows exactly what he's doing at all times. So it's great because you're not talking over your mix, but it really helps follow the, sort of what's going on in my head and the order in which I chose to approach things, which I think to me is a real lesson here, watching that back for myself and seeing what I chose to go after and how much time I chose to spend on things. And I think kind of being able to have that introspection to yourself is gonna, that's how you get better and you get faster, is streamlining that process.
Sometimes yours is a little bit drier than mine. Mine's gonna feel wet in comparison. What were you gonna say, Bangs?
I was just gonna ask everyone: were you guys still mixing, riding faders and whatnot during the last pass?
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
was.
Okay. When my timer went off, I went hands off, and that was it.
And you let it run through, yeah.
I just hit press play. So in mine, it's static mix, like just.
We'll be all the more impressed.
6 mixes from scratch.
Yeah, you really handicap
And
yourself.
just
You
static.
must be vicious on the golf course too. Like,
He's
I'm gonna
like,
play
you know
the
what,
golf
guys?
putter." Yeah.
I'm not trying to hand it to myself. I'm just curious what everyone else did.
I will bury all of you.
I thought that was the rule, like, and I
That's
talked
awesome.
to them after, and I was like, oh, it probably makes sense if you were like still riding faders during the last path, but I just didn't do that.
I mean, for me, this is a microcosm of a typical gig, right? I know enough about the advance to know what's probably coming down the snake, but I haven't heard it. And so, yeah, then I'm gonna have a 15-minute check, right? And then I have a show. And so, yeah, and it's not wild. I mean, again, you can see what I was doing. It's my right hand is just very gently on the subgroups and my left hand's on the lead vocal, and that's it. You'll see me. One of the things I did is after I get all my subgroups, I made a VCA called band for all my band subgroups. So your band vocal mix now comes down to 2 fingers, and then that just sits there. And so I'm not chasing all these subgroups around. So that allows me to be very gentle, but still kind of bumper car it back on track as it's going through. So I was riding faders, but it wasn't anything drastic.
Yeah, usually by the time you're like done setting it up, it should. Your hope is that it's just very, and you can see that in my video as well. Like by the time I'm in my final mix, it's like my hands are on the faders, and if you don't stare at them, it may look like they're not moving. I am moving them. They're just like they're a tiny couple of decibel changes.
But I will say, Potter, when you have a dynamic lead singer like this,
oh yeah,
I would rather ride it a little more.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Than really heavily process it, because I don't tend to like that sound where it's just compressed into a little. I mean, you can do that, but that's really not what this performance wants to be to my ears. So I mean, the band I mix regularly, I have 6 open vocal mics on stage, and I can't leave them all open all the time. So there's a lot of it almost looks like a musical theater. I'm hitting certain lines with those vocal mics. So I'm not afraid to get in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I agree with you. Like I did not. I don't even think I had time to compress his vocal. It was that if I was writing one thing, it was him. So
I just want to answer a question from Michael Fraley. Sorry if I screwed your name up in the chat. Why not use the left right as the band VCA? And that's a great question, and that's something that I would probably do in musical theater. The answer is that my whole mix is the band the left right main bus. To me, that's my final mix. And then that goes to different matrices. It's very similar to what Drew does, actually, I think. And then my matrix is not part of my mix because that's how I'm distributing the signal to the various parts of my PA. So the matrix is like post mix. It's not part of my mix. That's kind of what I usually do. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
So you were using a DCA to control your band groups? Is that what you were doing?
Yep.
Okay,
exactly.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, and I would normally, my finger does not leave the lead vocal ever. It's like stitched to it. I just didn't read the rules. And I thought,
the very thought out Google dog.
it was absolutely, but I've been doing a baseball game for the last week, and I got in super late.
Regular baseball game.
I did this morning, so yeah.
You don't need to make excuses, Bangs. It's gonna be amazing.
I didn't read Samantha's well put together and thought out advanced material, which I wouldn't do for my production manager either. I wouldn't read the day sheet either, so it works out.
That's it.
It's because I email him too much. He didn't have time to read your email because he was reading mine. I will email you last, Bangs. I'm sorry.
No, please email me more. Yours are fun.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the next one? I've arbitrarily put Willa next. Are you okay with that, Willa?
That's totally fine. And I have to just state real quick,
Oh, yeah,
I
caveat.
lied about my effects earlier. I forgot that I started out with the vocal delay and the vocal chorus, but I ended up just using the delay for my horns instead. So I forgot that that's
Ooh.
eventually what I changed to. So just so
Yes.
y'all know.
And your
Sorry.
track is a little bit shorter because it stopped recording in the middle of
Yeah,
it, but you just
yeah.
hit record again, so it's like 5 minutes shy, but it should
Yeah.
still be the last 3.5 minutes.
Se-
She's the honor system here.
7 minutes and 10 seconds is the beginning of
7
Willa's.
minutes. Nice.
7
Thanks,
minutes and
Michael.
10 seconds. No
All
problem.
right,
Willa, I
we're
got you.
going to Willa. 7. I'll
Okay.
write that in the chat. 7:10 on Willa. On Willa.
Ryan,
All right,
Ryan's already lost the
BRB.
link, so here's the link again for.
Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much time to sit and think about myself. And there she was, like double cherry pie. There she was, like disco superfly. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? Mama, this surely is a dream. Mama, it's a dream. Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much caffeine, too much caffeine, too much caffeine. Now there she was, in platform double sway. There she was, like disco lemonade. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? Mama, this surely is a dream. Mama, it's a dream. Sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? Mama, this surely is a dream. Mama, it's a dream.
Anybody want to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
That delay throw on the horns was hot.
Like,
Yeah,
It was a nice little-
yeah. Thank
a
you.
nice-
I was
Yes.
just, I heard the stop and I'm like,
Excellent.
I need some
Excellent choice.
spice. I need some
Yeah.
spicy here. So
It
that's
was
what I
spicy.
decided.
I
I'm
liked
so glad you liked it.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I heard John Mayer talk about his approach towards like songwriting, and he said there are a lot of things in my songs that they don't qualify as hooks, but they're events. He's like, it's a mini hook, and it's just a little thing that catches your ear, and that's an event. That's a nice little thing that you can do as a mixer to really give some excitement to the listener, but not go like, hey, look at me, look how good I mix. Like, that's not, you know what I mean? It wasn't to the point that it distracted.
Oh, good.
But it was a fun moment, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yay! That's exactly what I was going for. Hooray!
Everybody gives the musicians credit for that stuff anyway.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I also I like how bold you were with the volume sweeps on the Leslie.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
Also-
I lack the
Thank
fortitude to commit to that much dynamic range, but I feel like it's sort of like wind chimes, right? Like if you 3 times with wind chimes is too much, but you did it like twice and it was cool twice. You know, I don't think I'd
Yeah.
want to. If you did it 40 times, I'd be like, yo, that's out of control. But
it was only twice. Yeah, it was just like
that
whoop.
worked. That was
Yep.
cool, dude.
Cool. Yay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm
And
glad.
yours was, just comparing it to Michael's, like yours was way more Leslie forward, which I like. I don't think I heard much of the Leslie and Michael's. There was lots of
Actually,
keys.
I don't know, but I thought I was hearing the Leslie pretty loud in his mix.
Same.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe I'm mistaken. It's
I actually
already
kind of
2
felt like
mixes ago.
she
Maybe it's
took
just
it
what we're listening on.
creatively like louder, but like I think that thing that you did with the flipping one side out of phase helped keep you statically louder longer. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what it is. It probably doesn't call as much attention to itself because I'm not riding it like Willa
Yeah.
was, but I spent a lot of time trying to get it to sit out here, which means you can bring it up and leave it there without.
Are we all listening to on headphones or like right now, like I'm on in-ears, so I don't know whether that makes
Oh
sense,
yeah,
but-
I'm listening on what I listened to my mix on while I was mixing my near fields. I'm
Okay.
trying to listen at the same
Yeah.
volume. So that also, for those
Yeah,
that
that's
are
a good point.
in the chat and stuff and listening, what you're listening on does make a huge difference. What we
Mhm.
mixed on makes a huge difference. Like what we're listening to while we're mixing makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought
But, yeah.
you got the percussion to sit really nice. I didn't
Yes.
even really mess too much with the percussion because it's something that you could get away with. You know, I kind of left
Sure.
that last, and I thought it sat really nice in the mix there.
Thank you. I had fun with that. It was a delicious challenge to get the timbale and in those overheads. I kind of relied on the percussion overheads more than anything else, and then just kind of put a little bit of the timbale and the conga in just to like kind of fill it a little bit more, and then to get those to sit well with the drum kit. I thought was really fun to figure out how to stitch those together.
This isn't a comment on Willa's mix at all, but I just want to ask the panel: did anyone find the lead vocal mic to be really flat? Like, I just thought it was really lacking in sparkle, and
It was like band passed, right? And then it
Yeah.
had like a ton of like weird low frequency crap, and it was very like mid micy sound. Like you really heard that grill,
Yeah.
and then no top end. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
definitely. I probably would have chosen something else if I had done
Mhm.
that session.
The
Yeah.
really weird thing for me, and kind of the reason why I asked, is I did 2 years with Cedric at the drive-in on that same microphone, and so I'm very familiar with vocals on that microphone and with a very active and wild lead singer, and it just did not sound the same. Normally, I had so much top end in that mic, and I don't know what kind of M80 that was, but I've never heard a vocal sound like that through an M80.
He was also pretty far back on it. If you watch the video, he
Is
was
that- okay, I
not.
haven't seen the video.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
like,
was
with off
not
of it.
on top of that mic at
That's
all.
the thing,
so-
is if
I
you
need to
don't,
watch that.
that makes sense, because if you don't eat that mic, it dies really quick, which is why we chose it, because it's a loud band and a loud stage. It's probably why they would like it, because with all that stuff going on behind you, you don't want something like a KSM9, which is a beautiful microphone, but it becomes an overhead when you've got all
Yeah.
that crap.
Mhm.
Well, I
all
think
of
that's
that.
I think that's also at the root of why the dynamics are so crazy, because he was really active and the mic was on a stand. So, he's not getting that isolation and he's not getting the consistency of level or tone. That was I did way more to that vocal than I typically would in the desk, simply because we were all trying to compensate for those things,
Yeah, absolutely. If there had been just a little bit more sparkle in his voice, he would have cut through. I was definitely I just found myself pushing him up higher and higher. We haven't listened to mine yet, but so far your guys' vocals have sat really lovely. I would say Willa's, yours was a little bit lower, or sat just a little bit lower than Michael's, but probably right where I put mine. But I liked it. It definitely wasn't like smothered or anything.
Well,
good.
I you know what, it was interesting to hear that from you, Willa, because the last time that we all did a little group mixing activity, your vocal was like way on top, because at that point you were mixing in clubs where your whole gig is get the vocal on top, right? And so I think that's just, you know, and so to see how we've all sort of recalibrated to mixing on headphones or, you know, to hear you approach that differently, I think was really interesting. You know,
Well,
cool.
also I've been trying to take everybody's guidance and advice through all of these exercises that we've been doing to heart to try and like improve. Which despite COVID being absolutely terrible and horrible and all kinds of negative things, it's given me the gift of time to actually learn how to do this really well. And Ryan Ojan gave some really, really great advice to about utilizing compression a little bit more. And all of the feedback that I've had from y'all was extremely helpful. So I was trying to figure out, how do I get this to stand out while also sitting very well within everything, but also allowing for breath and also for dynamic range as well. So nothing too like squashed or anything, but something to just kind of let everything breathe, you know? So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't have a huge sample size, but from what I've heard that you were mixing a couple months ago and what I've heard you mixing now, I mean, it's really cool to hear the improvement. So
thank you.
Cool.
Yay.
Not that you
Twerking.
ever you never did a bad mix, but it is
Well,
definitely evolving.
No, but everybody gets better. I mean, every time you sit down and you do this, I did basically one of these a week throughout the whole, just for my own thing. And, you know, I know that I've definitely learned a lot about how to handle this stuff. So it's you know, it's just doing it is really helpful.
It's also like, I think it's a lot harder too, because I've always felt like the ears are like a muscle, just like any part of your body. If you don't use it, you start to fatigue. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to focus on as well. It's probably a reason why I jumped down the rabbit hole of video. But like, it's just trying to explain things. It helps to explain things. It also helps to listen, critically listen, to do these kinds of things, put us through these challenges. I think it makes us better. And also we have we're lucky enough to have a lot of people who are willing to just give away information. And I think that's fantastic, because it only makes all of us better. I wanted to ask you, did you have any pre-EQ, or did you do any EQ to the drums or anything? It's just all kind of...
When I started out, I didn't have anything. Everything was completely flat. And then I went through and just kind of high passed as I was listening.
Okay.
And so I high passed so I started mostly with my overheads. And I just kind of listened to where I was just getting the cymbals and the depth of the cymbals and less of like the kit. So I can just have my overheads be cymbal mics. And then I high passed on the vocals. And I think the guitars were pretty clean, so I didn't bother much with those. And then just gated my toms and my kick out. I didn't touch it too much because I thought it was mic'd really well.
Yeah. I was asking because I kind of felt it actually, I didn't think it was the vocal sitting below. Maybe it was a couple other things sitting high, because if I remember correctly listening to it, I always like the vocal and the snare drum to be right in your face. And I kind of feel like you nailed that. That's what I thought. That was fine. I feel like, that's why I asked about the EQ, and I was like, well, if your drum was flat, then that would make total sense of where the balance would come. And that's just a matter of like, there's a ton of instruments. It's hard to get them all to, 15 minutes is, might be a lot of time for bangs, but for me, I felt like I was just like, this is not a whole lot of time. I was like fighting to do that. So, but I also got to say too, I loved your bass. I don't know whether I thought it was when I heard the recording later of what the actual mix on the website, I was like, an interesting take, but to me it sounded like, no, but this was great because it felt like a P bass with a 70s kit. You know what I mean? And it felt great, like a low mid, like kind of vibe. Like it was all punchy and lows, and like
Drew,
I said,
that's really interesting comment, because I mean that's one area where I wish I had spent more time. Like my near fields have issues below 80 hertz, and it's just room size. So like that area of my spectrum overall just could have been improved. But just listening to it, like it really sounds like back when I was in college and I'm sitting up in a club in Cambridge, and there's like, a guy with a saxophone over there and a guy, like just a bunch of really good musicians on this stage, and you're sitting close. So it's like really wide, and it's kind of envelops you. It gave me a really vivid mental picture of where all the instruments were distributed, and I really enjoyed that because it's so different than what I did. So it was kind of a fun, experience.
Yeah, I would also say, like Michael, you had a touch more. You leaned a little bit more into the rock side of of this genre, and I would say, well, you leaned a little bit more away from that. And so it was just stylistically, it was just kind of a different approach, but it was, I really enjoy this. As I said with Michael, I did not hate this. If I heard this walking in, I'd be like, cool. This
That's
person
going to become your
knows what they're doing.
I didn't hate
She
this.
didn't hate it. Thank you.
You didn't hate it.
I don't hate this.
Is it? I think it's time for yours, actually.
Simon Cowell.
For us to not hate
I did
yours.
not hate this.
Yeah. All right. We can go to mine now. Michael, did you scrub and find out?
15 minutes and 20 seconds.
All right.
Is where Potter starts.
15 minutes and 20 seconds?
15, 20. Now, has Ryan lost the link again? Or does he still have it? That's my question.
All right. See you in 3.5 minutes.
Okay, he's got it. Okay.
We're listening to mine, Samantha Potter.
Downtown by myself, and I've had too much time to sit and think about myself. And there she was, like double cherry pie. There she was, like disco superfly. I smell sex and candy. Yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? My mother surely is a dream. My love is a dream. Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much caffeine, too much caffeine, too much caffeine. Now there she was, in platform double sway. There she was, like disco lemonade. I smell sex and candy. Yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that dancing deep stairs in my direction? My mother surely free. Mama is a friend. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that dancing deep stairs in my direction? My mother surely is a dream. Mama is a dream.
I think we have everybody back now.
We lost Holly.
He
Hope
went
he's
to
okay.
he went to the bathroom. It's okay.
Oh. Wow, you just threw him right under the bus there. That's crazy.
Well, he texted me. It's fine.
He's definitely not.
That's
We
awkward.
don't do that.
All right. Who wants to roast me first?
I'll step right up. I didn't hate it.
The upward tone at the end of that sentence said me.
No, you know what? It was interesting because it actually, I didn't hear like things poking out over, like typically when you are doing a quick mix and you don't have time to go in and add all the multiple compression stages that you would with in multi-band, like it seemed very controlled for the most part. I mean, obviously that vocalist is kind of a maniac, and if you haven't watched the video on YouTube, I encourage everyone to go do that. He's wearing a ridiculous outfit and bouncing around like a crazy person, and so there's just a huge challenge there for it's almost one of those things like when you see it on video, you're like, yeah, of course this vocal's inconsistent, but when you don't have the video, you're like, what is happening with this guy? And so there are those moments that we all had to deal with, but I think overall I didn't hear things poking out. It was a big soundstage. It was a really big, thick soundstage. I it's there were no gaps in there. Mine was a lot. I don't want to say thinner, but it was very much, everything had its own little place.
Yeah.
And yours was just it was like an IMAX. It was like this just big wide. Yeah, it was a very very non-system tech statement coming here. Like just the mental canvas image that it gives me, like, was just way big and very colorful and cool. Yeah. It was far less analytical than my mix. I will use that term.
If yours was more rock based and Will's was laying a little away from that, we're just continuing on. Mine was more of a jazz funk mix. Mine was much more perk forward than your guys's was. But at least so far.
Well, the thing about it's also interesting too, if you think about like developing relationships with bands, especially bands as large that travel with 12 to 15 people. It's a different kind of thing. You have to think about it. It's like whoever's in charge is paying a lot of money to send out a percussion player and a horn player. So I've always kind of felt like treating those things not as like, we're going to put you in the background, like they're featured, and that came from, a very specific band, but with Afrobeat, it's a little different. It's not like this. Afrobeat mixes itself, it has holes for everything. So you're allowed to make everything super loud, but also like the percussion. I like percussion forward. I liked it because it kind of carries a groove. I also love the low mids of your bass. It's like, I'm just like, that's because funk that's where you're the kick drum is funny so far. No one's like kick forward, which I love, because the kick is not what drives, what you enjoy the mix, even though that's the part of the first part of like learning how to mix is making a kick drum really loud and sound awesome. But it's like, it's by itself and it's not going to create the groove that you need with funk music, because, also if your crowd isn't dancing, you might not be great for you, as an engineer. Yeah. So I think that I thought it had a great groove. Like it felt fun. Like it was good. I would have loved to have the horns right in my face with the percussion, but I thought I could still hear them. They were just, you took a more of a behind the approach, but I could still hear them clear as day. So, I mean, that's an approach, but I dug it.
I really
did not hate it. I did not hate it.
What were you saying, Bangs?
I really liked your horns. I thought,
thank you.
Sorry, Drew. But I mean, the percussion was forward, but I really liked where you got the horns to sit, and they felt a lot more consistently in the right place than I felt about my own mix. So I don't know if you did that with compression or where you. But
a little bit kind of watching them and having worked with horn sections for so many years and doing so much jazz and funk like that, I just know where I went. They're bringing a lot of like the fun, snappy, like energy to it, and I didn't want to lose that. So yeah.
I like horns. Obviously you have to ride them to do this properly, but I like horns when it's kind of like a call and answer thing with the vocals. They should have their own spot where they. When the lead vocalist isn't singing, then put the horns out in front at the vocalist position, in the mix. And I like it. So.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, question. Is there a slide that has the input list on it or not? Someone was asking. I don't know.
I didn't, but maybe I can.
Well, there's a link to the the multi-tracks on the website, and also in the chat.
Analog. Sweet.
I'm probably the
Here.
only one
Oh,
that
yeah.
probably the only one that did this, huh?
You
Here's
printed it
part
off?
of it. Here's the first 19.
I just don't have a printer, otherwise I would.
There's the cat.
Sorry, guys.
I'm the old guy in the room, so
Listen, we're trying to be environmentally conscious right now.
I'm gonna use that for toilet tissue later.
Fair enough. All right.
Yeah, here's the first part of it, and then we can scroll down here. This is our my well thought out document that got sent out.
So Bangs is seeing this for the first time then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
He was just listening to it to figure out what it was.
I didn't just need any of the other stuff.
Willa, did you have any roasting you wanted to do?
Not roasting, just an observation. It's I think you mentioned that yours was probably going to be a little bit more wet, more reverby, and I definitely felt that as well.
Yeah.
And I agree with what everybody's saying. Everything sat very well together. It was very percussion forward, and then just like the amount of space that you added with the reverb was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, it was definitely more wet, but I didn't think it was overdone. And I also didn't, like, it was one of those instances where you are just hearing the reverb, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't like fishbowl. It was like a really good amount.
No, it was very reasonable. It certainly wasn't too much. It was interesting to me that I was kind of chuckling at is that the reverb actually has more like top end than the lead vocal itself. Like when the lead vocal went into the reverb and came back, it had all this like sparkle on top that was not really there in the original. And it was just an interesting it was an interesting thing. I'm like, wow, that really brought back, you know, because that mic just had such a roll off on top that was one of the things that I think we were all hearing. So it was interesting to hear that come back in the reverb, you know.
Edwina loved it.
Thank you.
She wanted to let you know by rubbing her face on the microphone. She loved it.
I used the room mic, and I know some of you guys didn't, but that aids in that like setting up the space.
Is that where some of your wetness came from? Was from the room mic?
For sure, yeah. And it was a genuine room mic. It was not like a drum room mic. It was like we literally put a microphone somewhere in the room. Yeah. And recorded it.
That's because they labeled it as a drum room, and that's why I didn't even bother with it. If I had known it was room mic, then I probably would have used it, because ambients are one of my favorite things in an in-ear mix.
Right.
So, I usually have like as much ambient as I have lead vocal in a lead vocalist mix. It's how you make people on in-ears feel like they're on the stage and not in a booth, you know. Now I'm sorry I didn't listen to it, but
well, that's
I listened to it for a second, but I was just like more trouble.
Well, that's the thing, because in live it's all about, we want to reduce ambient crap getting in, like it's all about isolation. So to me, like I sort of do my, like when we take our close drum mics and send them into a reverb, we're sort of making our own room, you know what I mean? And now in a studio I'll do it, but my mindset for this was very much live oriented. And so in that situation, I don't want any of that stuff in my mix. You know, if I need it, I'll add it. So
it's also like there's how many, like, because they mic'd the Leslie, so there was bleeding, but all three Leslie mics.
Yeah, percussion.
They
mic
mic.
for,
I think it sounded like the whatever the CP. What is it? The keyboard that they were using? It sounded like it was a mic on an amp. I don't think it was actual DI. I could be wrong, but I thought I heard bleed in that. And then I also feel like with two background vocals and a singer that's all over the place, I think I had plenty of room.
Yeah, there was no shortage of
room. Definitely no shortage of ambience. So
yeah. And Ryan asked earlier if I think it was directed at me. It was at 3:20, but asked if I was writing the lead vocal verb send return in those open sections, and I was writing the delay returning. I really that's a little thing I love doing for, especially on vocals, but really writing and kind of playing with that vocal delay during the really isolated periods to help thicken them up. And as soon as they're like the phrase is ending, I don't want there to be a tail, so I'm dragging down the fader, so I'm getting all of this like fullness right in the middle of the phrase and dropping out, and that really adds to a lot of space and making things kind of stand out. And me and Willa both used a chorus, and you can't hear it, which is the whole point. Is that it's just like this little
personality.
secret. Yeah. And I picked it up from Jim
Little
Yak.
secret. I love
who,
that.
If he was here, we've already name dropped him twice. It's like a nice, I did it once after he told me, and I was like, yeah, I actually kind of like this. I don't do it every time, but it's really just adding some extra weird dirt down towards the bottom. It just adds a little something and it causes a little bit of separation from everything else.
Oh, go ahead, Drew. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say you had delay on your horns too, right? Because I thought I heard of delay trail, or was that just the leakage from the vocal?
No, that was me soaking the horns, and the horns got more reverb than everything. Yeah.
Nice.
Because
Okay.
knowing, especially like saxes just sound so good, like on those hits where they're just playing by themselves, like right before everything else drops out.
Yeah.
And hearing that tail go is just like really satisfying. And so
Yeah.
I like your comments about like playing with the level of the reverb return, and that's a pretty common musical theater trick.
Mhm.
They actually will do their reverbs pre-fader, so you can manipulate that independent of the actual level.
Yeah.
Like generally with the pit, like I did it for when I did West Side Story. It was a big loud orchestra, and it was in a hall that didn't need reinforcement on the band. But by bringing the reverb up in the PA, the orchestra doesn't get louder, but it gets bigger and wider, and so it really changes the audience experience. And so that's also, it's a trick that I sort of found out by doing bands that play in small rooms. My drum faders are all the way down because there's so much drums off the stage, but I still want a drum reverb in the mix.
yeah.
So if you do your reverbs pre-fader, that was a utility for me originally, but it allows you to be artistic with that reverb tail, and it gives you a lot more range. So that kind of just reminded me of what you said, that's a dirty little trick to throw in there.
It's fun.
The three faders that are always on the right of my center bank, it's always the vocal, and then the vocal verb delay, or the vocal verb DCA and the vocal verb delay DCA. So it's like I have a hand on that, and that's how I feel like choruses, being able to, like, you could usually ride the vocal up into the reverb and then switch it and kind of throw a reverb in and make the choruses bigger. And then you can also do the same effect by bringing the vocal up and the reverb down. I think that that's a great way to, like, give your singer a little bit more of a space, you know what I mean? And also to make them bigger on the choruses. I've been doing that for pretty much my entire career. It's always been that. It's always like one hand on the reverb, one hand on the vocal. It's like it's always usually like try to make the big vocal. So
Yeah.
Props to that. Love that.
Thank you.
Are we ready to
Yeah.
go to Drew's?
I think
So
we're ready
go.
for Drew's now.
Drew's starts at 15 minutes and 58 seconds.
15:58.
15:58.
Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much time to sit and think about myself. And there she was, like double cherry pie. There she was, like disco superfly. I smell sex and candy. Yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting these stares in my direction? Mama, this surely is a dream. My love is a dream.
I didn't hate it. So yours was
All I was going
like,
for.
yours was super drum forward, and the drum sounded so good. This is definitely
Yeah.
a very
Mhm.
different like stylistic approach. Which I I don't know your whole who you've mixed for your entire career, what your style has been mostly, but I can feel that. And the drums, the toms especially, were like really nice and big.
A little too
and
big.
I
Listening
enjoyed
to it again, I'm like, oh God.
and your horn section was like much further back than
Yeah.
compared to mine. Coming right off of mine, it feels like yours is sitting further back. But again, it's
Yeah.
not like it's wrong. It's just something I noticed. I liked it though. This was good.
Yeah.
Your
Whereas
drums
me-
are always really good. I've heard you mix a lot, and I loved your drums. I think they're great, and I like how forward. I was just laughing because as soon as the song started, I was like, "You were just talking about how you don't put the kick drum forward." I was like, "Yeah, you do." That
Yeah,
makes
but
me
with the
mad,
bass,
you know?
bass.
Yeah, your bass was beautiful.
Like my
That was a
bass,
great mix.
I would like to think my bass and the kick drum were at least close.
Yeah, no, it
yeah.
wasn't too far forward. I was saying,
Yeah.
I think it was great. I really like the way you do drums, and I
Yeah.
like the mix. The
Yeah.
thing, like, you found the sparkle that I knew I was missing, but didn't have the time to pull forward. Like yours had the air and the sparkle. There's no other word for it that I wanted, that I was missing.
Yeah.
Like you'll hear it. Like I know when I listen to mine again that especially right after yours, it's just gonna feel dull after, So
Yeah.
I'm not sure
I
where you
would say,
found all that, because I thought the inputs were pretty flat to begin with, except for the guitars, which were crunchy. But
well, I mean, I also like I approached this the same as I would if someone was hiring me to go and mix them. So I actually had that pull tech EQ I was using on that one episode 3 where I was driving the D Live hard and wasn't using any left right processing. So I used that on the main left right. So I was boosting the top of the mix before I even heard it. That was the mix. That was like I was going into it, because that's usually I have like a pull tech as like a flavor over the entire mix. And then I was also like, I didn't use any EQ on the channel, but I had a Dyne 8 and I brought down the low mid and the low bands, and I compensated 3 dB either way. I added 3 dB to the top, the high mid and the highs, and then brought down the other bands 3 dB. And it kind of turned out. Also, I kind of overdriven his vocal too. I think when he got really loud, I kind of didn't notice how crunchy it was getting. But I did, ever since this quarantine thing, I kind of discovered that tool, the dual stage tube valve. So now it's like, I have a setting that I just slapped it on everything. And I was just like, screw it. I'm going to drive into all this and try to make everything big and beautiful and bright. So that might
if I had 5 more minutes, I would have loved to have put that on some more of the inputs. But and again, your bass sounded great as a bassist. It was lovely.
Thank you.
Drew, I think, and I hope people will go and download these tracks and listen to what we were working with in terms of raw inputs, because where the real big, I mean, we've talked about some of the challenge, like the lead vocal dynamic ranges is a challenge on this, but to me, overall, the biggest challenge is the bottom octave and the top octave. The frequency extremes across the board, it seems, on these tracks were very, very, there just wasn't a lot there to work with. So, like your kick had that sub energy, but it was very defined still. And that's a very difficult thing, especially when you have, you don't have that in the raw track. You know what I mean? Because usually I'm like, that's a well-tuned drum with a really nice mic on it. It's very hard to do that in post if you don't have it. So I want, if people are going to play with this, I want them to kind of pay attention to how you got the frequency extremes to sit, because that's the challenge here.
Yeah. And it was also a very dark drum. Like I felt like I was having a hard time. I don't know about you guys, but I was fighting to get it to cut through everything that was happening. I felt like it was almost too big, so I was trying to find that happy medium, but I do side chain a little bit on the bass group. So I kind of play I kind of have a setting now that I kind of like over the last year or so. So I kind of had that and I had it open. And then when I got to probably where I was adding effects, I added that kind of as good as I, kind of, after the fact.
I used a very similar variant. My bass input is split.
Yeah.
And it's divided like 80 hertz and down and then 80 hertz and up.
Yeah.
And just the low, just the sub is sidechained under the kick. So you're not losing that. Now there wasn't a ton of like high stuff in this bass, didn't have that kind of glassy Victor Wooten sound that I would have wanted, but I
didn't find any attack in it.
Yeah. That's really the challenge overall, is that it was a very natural ambient recording. It really sounds like a coffee house kit to me. It didn't have that big studio sparkle. So I think that's where a lot of this talking about having 5 more minutes, and I've kind of got an internal block on a lot of this stuff where I go like, look, you got for example, someone would come in, I've got a nasty sounding snare drum, it's got a ring, it's got an old head, like, okay, I recorded that though, that's what it sounds like now, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I have a very strong internal block on like, let me go do 20 minutes of surgery on this to salvage it. So I think when you have tracks coming in like this, part of me just says, well, this is what it wants to be, and I'm like, I'm okay with that. But you didn't settle for that. You were like, no, I'm gonna make you what I want you to be.
Well, I mean, I would say my approach too. I kind of thought to myself, I'm like, when you have 15 minutes and the clock starts, are you putting too much into the show that you're not going to be able to fish yourself out if you kind of get into it? And like I kind of ran with my standard drum processes. Like I didn't even adjust the thresholds. I just went for it. So I added a kick and snare bus, which is something that I want to do in the future for, Billy or whatever. But it's one of those things where I was just like, kind of like, okay, well, I was playing with this because of others, the episodes that I've done, but you could get really in the weeds with that. Sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. And I would feel like one thing I would say is that I actually did take the 5 minutes after. So when I was done with this, I was like, all right, so I'm going to save 3 scenes in my console, the pre-show, what happened after 15 minutes. And then I took like another 30 minutes and I was like, how could I take this? And then I realized all the mistakes that I felt like I made, like the drums could come down a little bit. The horns they're too thin. I felt like I could push the horns low mid information. The perk might have been a little spicy. And I also honed in on that 100 to like 300, because that's such an important range in funk to move. Like, and also I didn't like the vocal reverb. I didn't really mess with it a whole lot. I kind of left it static.
What preset did you use?
I believe it was just a modded vocal plate. But I also EQ into it, so that helps. And then EQ usually on like just standard EQs on the out. But yeah, that's the toughest part. I also didn't like my snare reverb. I like.
Did you like your mix? Like,
yeah. I was just about to ask the same thing. Sounds like you hated everything you did.
But honestly, no, I liked it. But also, I think that's another thing too. Like, I feel like trying to look at your own work and figure out where you can, what you don't like, what you can move forward, and trying to step and separate yourself from it. I think that's the most important thing. It's like, I think it turned out good. I mean, I can always do better. And I think that's what I always wanted to get better. I want to learn from everyone. Like, it doesn't matter who.
That's such a big thing though, to be able to divorce yourself enough from your creative output that you can go back and look at it objectively.
I don't want to tear myself apart.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I also, another thing I was thinking when I was listening to this, you've really gotten yourself into a nice spot because you've been focusing so much on drum stuff with your videos, and which I absolutely encourage everybody to check out if they haven't seen them. But when you get into multiple stages of, threshold based things, gates and then comps, and then doing that again on the bus, and then having your dynamic, the margins of error are small. I mean, I moved a threshold last night at rehearsal by like 1 dB, and it came back. I was like, yeah, that's what I was hearing for a half hour and didn't know what it was. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's a narrow thing that you walk, and so that stuff really takes time to dial in. And so I think you sort of springboard yourself nicely there because you've been living in that world for the last couple of weeks working on that stuff, you know. And I think like you said, if I had another half hour, that's the stuff that I'm going to go dig into. But I'm very one thing you won't see me do too much in the video is set a gate, because it's the same thing. That threshold, you know, you got to get that. Yeah, you got to get that right. And if I don't have time to sit there and get it right, I'm not going to do it. So it was just, you know, kind of a thought that you've done yourself a favor by developing this workflow where you can drop stuff in and you know, because you've spent so much time finessing that stuff. I think that's cool.
I like what you did. I think I may do it as well. Like save it where it sits and then give myself like 30 more minutes and then save that one and see where I take it, especially after having heard all of everybody else's. Like that will change what I've done.
Well, and I think it's extremely fun because that's one of the points that I want to do in the video that I want to do. I want to show people this is what a mix engineer does. This is no mix. This is 15 minutes. This is an hour or whatever. And then that's kind of, and the funny thing is like, it's so true. The last 10%, the last 5-10% of your mix is the hardest part. And if you flip between the two scenes in my show, I'm like, well, I could also venture to say there's, you know, to an average listener, maybe there's not a whole lot of difference. But to me, it's like, that's where I always want to learn. I want to, you know, and not, you know, dude, it's great to have this platform is so great.
That's the thing that I was thinking over and over again as we're going through this, because I was thinking about if my parents are at the show, all of these mixes, they're all going to leave and pet whatever, you know, it could have sounded like anything that we've heard so far. And they're going to say, good job, son. Sounded great. Like they don't hear the stuff that we hear because we're trained to hear that stuff. So like, you know, 15 minutes in, your vocal better be on top. You know what I mean? Like the broad stroke stuff is what keeps your job in those first 15 minutes. And then we go and we work on this stuff that we're talking about. But, you know, the people are happy at this point. You know what I mean? I think that's just an important point to make. Yeah.
Yeah, Willa, what's up?
Willa, what you got?
Roast master.
Horrible. No, I'm kidding. It was wonderful. It was
Did you hate it?
No, of course not. I don't think I could hate any of these mixes at all. I mean,
well,
everyone here
listened to Bangs yet, so we'll see.
I mean,
Jesus Christ.
Sam is just, wow, she is murdering.
Shots fired.
So, I mean, just to like comment on Michael's last couple of words there, like, I mean, there's nowhere to go but up for all of us. And I love that all of us are willing to kind of just put ourselves out there and be vulnerable and be like, this is what I did. I would love to hear what you think, and give each other like constructive criticism. And it's like, and it's all in like kind of a supportive environment of like, okay, so we are all here to get better. And you can only get better. And that's kind of the beauty of this industry, because things are always changing. You're always mixing something different. You're always listening to something new. And there's always a new way to do something and new things to try. And there's 1,012 ways to skin a cat with just about anything that we're doing here. And that's kind of, that's just so cool.
I hope your cat didn't hear you say that. That would be cruel.
I mean, she's right here, so she totally did. But, you know, it's okay. What was up, Mike?
I said, that's how you keep them in line. Verbal threat.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I would also venture to say too, 15 minutes is a challenge.
It is.
To like literally, like you can't, like it takes that's 3 songs, and that's the world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
This is also a different kind of thing, because we all decided, we'll go ahead and do this in front of everybody, and that's nerve-wracking. You know, that is kind of
terrifying.
I was kind of shaken when I was like, oh man, like.
But
I've never had. I haven't done that.
Show is though.
Yeah,
a show.
No, I'm
usually,
always prepared for the last festivals. The last 2 years, I've had my gear. I've had a show file. I've had mics and a gain structure. It's been a while since I've throw and go for this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm lucky and also unlucky, and this is a challenge. And glad to do it. I think everyone should try it.
It's a great exercise. Yeah, to get something that's just like, okay, this is a good starting point within 15 minutes. And because it's we're getting, and another thing is like, we're also getting to know the song as we're going through that 15 minutes. And then when we, which is kind of an unusual thing. is normally we would have 3 songs, and so we can't really do any sort of like nuanced thing for each individual song. So this one we were able to kind of learn the nuances of this particular piece and go along with it. And Drew, I think you definitely managed to find a really good spot for everything. I loved that your kick drum was really punchy and in your face. That's something that I was like dying to get, but I couldn't figure out quite how to do it. But it wasn't stepping on anything. It was definitely like, okay, I can feel it and I'm moving with it. And the snare was like just under the vocal. And I think you nailed exactly what you were intending to go for, which is like your 2 favorite things are the snare and the vocal. And they were all right there, but they weren't like they were stacked, but they weren't like clouding each other at all. And I really appreciate what you did with the space. I thought it was a great mix. It was very polished.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sounded great.
Appreciate it. So we didn't hate it?
No, we didn't hate it.
Potter
I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it.
Perfect.
Bangs.
Yep.
All right.
16 minutes and
Well, but Banks, did you have anything to say about Drew's?
Before it. Yeah.
Sorry. Did you have anything to say about Drew's? Any comments you wanted to add?
I went first.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
I guess I just blacked out during that. My bad.
All righty, here we go.
Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much time to sit and think about myself. And there she was, like double cherry pie. There she was, like disco superfly. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? Mama, this surely is a dream. Mama, it's a dream. Hanging around downtown by myself, and I've had too much caffeine. Ow! Too much caffeine. Ow! Too much caffeine. Now there she was in platform double suede. There she was, like disco lemonade. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? My mother surely is a dream. Mama, there's a dream. I smell sex and candy, yeah. Who's that lounging in my chair? Who's that casting deep stares in my direction? My mother surely is a dream. Mama is a dream.
appreciate that silent period. I've become acutely aware of how loud my furnace is in that brief interlude.
All right, and just in case anybody missed it beforehand, this is not your degular front of house mix. This is a lead vocalist monitor mix.
Very much so.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yep.
It's also a static mix too.
It is, yes.
And he
I
did
noticed
5 other mixes too.
Yeah, on top of 5 other mixes.
So,
So this
everyone
is
else has it. This is
Yeah, if you
one
go
of
back in the recording, you can hear the other mixes. I did a drum wedge and a guitar wedge, 3 wedge mixes and 3 ear mixes. But
no big deal.
that's
And I would notice it was static, but it was interesting because sometimes the snare like really popped out and it was a great snare sound, but other times it felt like it was like hiding behind something, and I'm not sure. I was just like trying to find it periodically. But I thought for a lead vocalist mix, I mean, it was exactly what every lead vocalist ever wants to hear, which is themselves. So
were you doing like ducking your band bus under the lead vocal or something like that?
I don't have a bus. I mix on faders, period, inputs. I don't do subgrouping, any of that.
gasp.
I don't use DCA, none of it. So yeah, I mix on inputs. That's it.
Damn kids with your touch screens and your VCA.
And your groups processing.
Well, I loved it because that is what I would feel like a punchy ass vocal mix would feel like. Like the low mids were really, really punching. And I closed my eyes, I could feel like I was on a stage, and that's what you want as the singer. The vocal was right here where that's what needs to be. And all the drums, and I mean, I would venture to say you didn't really go through and add any compression, but the band did have a certain way of controlling themselves because they were listening to each other, right? And they probably got a static mix too when they recorded it. So if you get the levels in check, they can kind of do most of the work for you. And that's what I felt. I was like you were saying about how the snare would come through, but also I felt like it was at the same time, the vocal was like right there. And I was like, oh man, like the kick drum, the snare drum, and the vocal is just like punching you, which is great. Cause that's usually what singers want. You know what I mean? Like they want to, and the bass was great too. Like it all was just that very, I don't know. It's because if anyone hasn't mixed monitors before, I'm like literally, I'm not a monitor guy by any means, but I do know that there's an art form in being able to get something to cut through what's actually happening on stage and what's coming out of the PA. So you will have to have this excessive amount of punch to kind of go through it. And I thought it was incredibly punchy.
You guys are all killing me with.
Say what?
To get over the subs that you guys are all killing me with.
Yes.
Normally,
subs?
like I do my kick drum mics. I don't Michael was saying earlier about his bass. I have one of my kick drum mics is high pass and one of them is low pass, and I use them as 2 different instruments. And that's mostly out of necessity because somebody in the band wants a tackier kick drum and somebody wants a more pillowy kick drum. I can't keep re-cueing, for each person. So that just allows me to blend the 2. And I normally would have a much more attacky kick drum to get over the subs, but because my torso wasn't shaking like it normally was, I played it back a little bit. So,
well, I think I was trying to listen from the mentality of a lead. Like if I'm a lead singer and I have to cue off this mix, like that's like where I try to put my mind. And I do 5 in-ear mixes from front of house with my artist, and so if you listen to her mix, it's not pretty. It's not something you'd want to sit there and listen to, but it was, and then she'll be like, Mikey, any more guitars? And then the next song, Mikey, turn the guitars down. So there's a real edge there where what I think what you did very well is everything's there if you listen for it. So if you're a lead singer, you're pitching to yourself. You're listening to yourself. You're listening to your own performance. If there's a line on guitar that singer wants to hear, they're listening for it. It's there in the mix. So it's all sort of on the tabletop there and nothing's buried, it's very much all laid out. And it's just a matter of like, what's the, the cocktail hour effect, right? That I'm listening for this particular thing and I can hear it.
Yeah. I thought the priority on the space for the vocal was also great because it's like, not only that, was like you could tell that the reverb was wide, like for the vocal, but it wasn't loud. So it was kind of adding more width to the vocal. I could feel it out here on my ears, which is huge because every singer wants to feel huge. You know, that's the whole point. And when you're in your head, it's a fine line between head noise and feeling huge and clear.
Right.
That's awesome, dude. That was okay.
Mike, I'm curious what you did with your bass, because the bass had just this really nice growl texture to it. Did you do anything?
Gain stage, and then I did with, like I was saying, I was missing a lot of sparkle, and so I never do boost EQ, but I felt myself doing, like, reaching for boost EQ. I did put I did pull up a little bit of the high mids in the bass, and then I pulled down some of the like the 200 range, it was like 160 to 200 just seemed muddy to me, and so I just pulled that, and it just gave it a little bit a little more clarity, I guess. I may have taken away some of the Drew's dance beat, but
you know, I actually did that same cut in the 200 range, and that was one of the things that I regretted. When I came back, I gave it back because I was like, you know what, it's fine, and I focused on controlling it at the dyne 8 level over the group, because I felt like that's what I felt like. I was missing a little bit of that punch. You have all that punch in your ears. That's what I love, because you listen to a record, that's what happens. It's like it's punching you, especially in that range.
Yeah, I really wish I had the time to do dyne 8, because I was missing it. I mean, you were joking about how 15 minutes is a lot of time to me. It's the same as everybody else. I will spend, I spend 45 minutes doing dynamic EQ and multiband sometimes in virtual soundcheck, so if I have the time, I'll take it. But Michael said something earlier that just is summed up exactly how I felt, is just the most important thing for me with this was get it where no one's screaming at you and the band can perform, because that's my job, because, your mix can suck and they'll keep playing because they can't hear it. If my mix sucks, we'll stop playing. And so my goal is always to get the show on time and to make it so, make it so that they can actually perform. And everyone else was saying something else was the opposite to me. I struggled because there was no one yelling at me. Like I seriously, like I felt like I couldn't focus very well because there was no one screaming at me, and there was like nobody flipping me off and like giving me dirty looks and waving their arms. So like, I was like, I have all this time to myself in my own head. What do I do?
That's because you work from home, right? I mean, I think if you go into the office, they can probably set that up for you.
Yeah, you should have just had Jeff yell at you or something.
I was going to say, we could have all gotten on a Teams meeting together, Mike, and we could have just flipped you off and yelled at you for a little while. I mean, I had time.
That really bums me out when someone comes to my house and flip me off. It's happened too, but it does not have the same effect.
So I'm just used to being, it's just a different vibe. I also, I said it as a joke, but it's actually true that like I didn't eat anything or drink anything or go to the restroom for several hours before I did this. Like, just because it was just like, I don't know, just because I thought it was funny.
I actually have that same, because you're sharper. I have the same thought process. It's like, if I'm going to do something and I have to think on my feet, I don't want to have a full stomach because I feel like all the blood's going to your stomach. It's like, it's weird how the sadistic environment we live in creates something magical happening in like 2 to 3 songs when the band hits the stage.
I think it's like, because you have to work harder to focus. So all of your energy, because at least for me, I live by food. I love to eat, especially tacos while we're here. Yeah. So if I'm hungry, then and I'm mixing, then I have to actively work hard to focus on what I'm doing. And in essence, yields better results, I like to think. So.
Yeah, but third song, I would have been ramming a cold hot dog down my face.
I was gonna say I did literally start this call off by eating my
Taco Bell.
lunch. Yeah, in front of
So
everybody. So
the answer is, if you had 5 more minutes, it would have been a hot dog.
Right.
No, really, the getting into DinyQ is where I, because that's my where I really find what I'm looking for is in there. And I just didn't. I'm impressed that you got into Dynate, Drew, because like I didn't even.
It's risky business.
Yep. I used mine on some of my group processing, and it was like very light. Like, I think this is where this is going to end up. And then I checked it. You can see it on the video of me checking it, like at the end, like, is this hitting it? Is this what I want? Like, it was.
there's a big risk reward trade-off there with that. That stuff can really bail you out, but you can also really dig yourself in a hole with it. So that's why, it's a little bit at a time is what I usually advise people.
Yeah. Well, and it's so weird too. Like, I've always kind of ventured to, and it's probably a really fast way of dealing with things, but if you start to have similar gain structures and you have a console for a period of time, like I have, you get used to it. And then you kind of figure out, okay, well, if I set my compressor, which is right before everything else, and I know that if I hit 2 lights on my compressor, it's where my threshold is going to be landing. And then hopefully, you can use your trim to kind of make up the gain where we would normally be using, our preamp, and just hit those compressors. And if you can hit that first stage, sometimes you can get away with murder after that. Sometimes you check yourself in, but I mean, it doesn't always work. And I think the thing that, helped me was that I had a vocal Dynate set up from one of these things. And I was like, well, I'm just going to dump this guy right in the session. It's like, and just run into it and see what happens. I think that was luck. Cause I got to say, one thing I will say, I did not spend as much time on the vocal as I probably have been, should have, but I felt like it was there. And then I just kind of moved on to the next thing that was annoying me.
I did the vocal first.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's the one that gets you fired,
Well, yeah. Well, the vocal, yeah, of course. You want to. That's where I was like, okay, I'm good there, and then I moved on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. So.
And I do want to say, for anyone that cares, the key to me to be able to get the 6 mixes and how I did it, I started with the lead vocalist mix, except I kept the lead vocal down. Then I copied and pasted that mix to the 5 other ones, and then pushed the lead vocal up and then moved on to the next mix. So I started with 1, but that's a big thing. And this console makes it super easy. And that's like the only reason that I was able to pull this off was because I built 1 stereo mix. I did all the panning and everything for 1. And then I copied that to everything, including the monos. It works. You can copy it. It just recenters everything. Obviously it resums everything. So I did everything with the lead singer's mix except for exaggerate their vocal level. And then I pasted it everywhere else, and then pushed his vocal up, and then moved on and started correcting, if you will, the other mixes as I went along. So that's kind of my secret that I wanted to share with everyone. Use copy and paste on the mix. It makes a huge difference in time.
So when did you do that? Did you do that like in 10 minutes in or something? Or like when did you feel like you...
First, I
decided to do 6 other mixes?
No, that was always my plan.
Yeah.
So I haven't looked at the clock. I think I probably spent 3 minutes or so patching, labeling.
Oh yeah, you did that too.
Putting faders on the surface. I had to spend some time assigning things to my IEM, because that's where my recording was. So that kind of stuff. I don't know where I was in the clock. Did anyone else, like, were you all guys watching the clock? Because I didn't look at it at all.
I set a timer so I wouldn't have to think about it.
Yeah, that's what I set my timer, and I had it so I could see it flash when it went off, but my phone was black until it went off.
Oh.
See, I did the opposite. I had it on a big screen. Because again, this is part of this exercise to me is all about priorities. And okay, well, if you only have 30 seconds left, what are you going to touch? And I want to get to that, but this is more important. So to me, like I really want to. It's almost like, I mean, I ran cross country in high school, right? It's like you got to pace that. You have to have an idea of where you are and where you're trying to go, so you can make the best call. And so that's I paid a lot of attention to where the timer was.
The only
That's
time
cool.
I'm-
Same
You
here.
do that. I don't have that discipline. The clock would have been distracting as hell to me, and I would have been a lot less efficient. But
So
that's-
no concept of time and verbal abuse are really what you need to be successful. It sounds like.
And lack of food.
What were you gonna say, Willa?
The only time I looked at the clock was when I looked over and noticed that my DAW had stopped recording. And then I just like, okay, so how much time do I have left? I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to restart the DAW and then go from here.
Mhm.
So that's the only time I looked at it. Other than that, I just had the timer set and kept going.
Yeah, I probably checked it 2 or 3 times so I could, when I didn't want to think about it, it was out of my vision. But when I thought I was ending like a segment of my mix, I checked the clock to see, okay, I've got this many minutes left. Like I need to focus on this because I wanted to end before the last run through. I need to hear this full band together with everything like as is before I jump into showtime, as it were. So
What about you, Drew? Did you?
I proactively, like Michael was like, I want to focus the last 5 minutes on effects and not even really messing with effects, but just adding enough. And then if I need to change anything. So I did manage to look over it a couple times, and I had the timer right where I could see it. And I changed my phone to where the screen would literally stay up the whole time. And as soon as it was 10 minutes, I was like, okay, I'm just start pushing up effects and kind of messing with them, kind of playing with balances, try to get the space right and whatnot. And then I felt like the last couple minutes were the minutes that went the fastest. It caught me by surprise, to say the least. So,
I think there's a big difference in approach, because there's a big difference between what Bangs did, which is I have people listening from second one, and so it's get something usable as fast as I can, and then finesse it, versus I have 14 minutes left until someone's going to be listening to this. So you'll hear me go through my inputs one at a time. I start kick, I go to snare, I go through the whole thing. So it doesn't sound like a mix for the first 5 minutes because I'm going one at a time. Whereas if you've got an artist on stage who's queuing off your IEMs, you can't do that. You have to start, you know what I mean? So, so if this were a throw and go at a show, and I didn't get a line check or a sound check, then obviously I would do a different workflow than what you'll see me do in the video. But if you do get a line check,
PFL, you did the PFL
yeah,
to your,
I went pretty much what I would do in a studio, which is that first just sweep through and let's listen to every input, makes it something wacky, and you know what I mean. So you're going to see me go through channel by channel, which again, if it's, hey, the show's starting right now, obviously I'm not doing that. It's going to be faders up and closer to what Mike did. So I just think for people that are going to watch these afterwards, pay attention to that. There's a very different mindset there,
Yeah, I just went full on. I just left. I put up all the faders, just like Bangs and I were doing a festival. I was just like, there they are, and then just start pulling things down and pushing things up, and
That was
I'm right there with you, Drew.
For everyone. Did everyone do it like the show's starting in 15 minutes, or the show has started?
Show started.
Show has started. Yeah, and for me, with the mixing choices that I like to make, I want to hear how everything sounds together, especially since this is a studio recording that we're mixing. How does it sound without any processing from me? And then just like, what is the relationship that everything is supposed to have together? And then how can I clarify that relationship from there? So get everything up, listen to it for a couple seconds. Okay, I kind of understand the role that each instrument is playing. Now, how can I make that work most effectively?
What about you,
It's
Samantha? Did you do show has started, or I've got 15 minutes?
Somewhere in between. It was like I definitely like threw up the drum kit, and I just needed to hear like what was happening. But as I'm going through everything, I'm definitely like baffling it and going like, wait, where is this sitting, or what is this supposed to sound like? I'm finding things. So yeah, it landed somewhere in between, as in like maybe I heard them like finish the last couple of minutes of the rehearsal, and I'm like just trying to like get it up and going for downbeat at 15 minutes. So
I did something else also that is probably a little bit different than what you all did.
He mastered it and cut it to vinyl. And sold it.
It's already up on sale.
This might be. We'll see. We'll see what the panel thinks. This may be cheating a little bit, but I looked at the waveforms and I made a loop of a section where everyone was playing. So that, and I listened to that instead of the whole song, because I didn't want to waste time waiting for them to play.
Yeah.
So I found an area where there was a drum fill and a horn fill, and it was like,
Oh, I scrubbed.
Yeah.
it was like
Where are you at?
I didn't listen to it. I just looked at the waveforms, and
Yep.
then I made like a 40-second loop. And I just listened to that for the entire 15 minutes. So there was no time where I was waiting for someone to play. If I went to an instrument, I had it. You know?
Too valuable of time. Yep, I definitely scrubbed and was like, where are you playing at? What's happening? Like with the horns. That's like, where are you at?
Well, you know what else? I mean, talking about the mental pacing thing, like, this is a 4-minute song or a 3.5-minute song. Like, so it's going to go by 4 times and then I'm done. You know what I mean? Like, so mentally, I just looped it. I looped the whole thing and let it go. And so I know once I get to the second time through, when that's done, I'm halfway, so again, it's giving me a mental progress bar of, where I have left. So yeah, it's really interesting to see just the differences in approach there,
Yeah. I knew like the toms, for example.
Sorry.
Did you need just something, Jeff?
I know I was just going to make a bad joke about whether you allowed for enough time to get some quotes and photos for me while you were doing your mix.
I would have. I can't even tell you how many press photos that I've taken from behind the desk while I was doing a show.
Nice.
But
You said
I forgot.
toms.
Oh yeah. So for toms, for example, like I could wait a minute for him to hit the toms and then they're gone again. So I didn't want to have to do that, Again, I think it takes more discipline to do it the way that you did. And that's why I said I kind of cheated a little bit, because I didn't want to have to look for those inputs and have a fleeting moment with them and then not see them again, So I just found a spot where everything was always there.
Well, I think, I took the exact opposite approach for the same reason, because I'm not going to stare at my tom input and wait for that thing to come up, right? And wait for the doom, and then we're on the next thing. So like, you sort of know in macro what your tom EQ is going to be. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a high pass, and then it's going to be a boost, and then it's going to be a cut. So you'll see me put that in on one tom and then paste it to the other tom, and then I just keep going, because, and I may come back and tweak it. But again, if I'm within 2 dB of what's reasonable, I'm going to leave it there if we have 12 minutes left. So it's the same mentality, which is I'm not going to sit here and wait for this tom to come up, but I have a reasonable expectation of what it is, because I've heard it here and there as I'm listening, and then bang, there you go, and then I'm going to move on. So yeah, it's very broad brush,
All right. Well, we have been on for nearly 2.5 hours, so
Wow.
we will give everybody a break. Thank you guys. Thank you for everybody tuning in, but especially thanks for you guys for joining me into this weird project thing I wanted to do. But this was a lot of fun, and we're definitely going to do this again.
Yes.
Yay! Good.
Thanks for having us.
Next time featuring Willa's cat also. Will be
Edwina. Yeah.
Featuring Edwina, yes.
Yeah, and as noted in the thread, feel free to just ping either Samantha or myself, and we'll look at what the next round of contestants looks like. Obviously, Alan and Heath preferred, but we're open to seeing how it might pan out. And as I said, kind of rising tide floats all boats. So we're here. Hopefully, there's some tips and tricks, on any desk that you could pick up. A lot of this is very general and applicable. So feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep.
And thanks, everybody.
I just let my handle and my email in the chat for anybody who wants it. But yeah, thank you guys, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.